My name is Anna Vosswinkel. I'm a curator for contemporary art with a focus on photography. I have a background in visual arts, in cultural and gender studies. I worked as a freelance curator in Berlin mainly, and in Leipzig. I was teaching photography there. And since 2023, January 2023, I have a permanent position as a curator at Camera Austria. I'm head of the exhibition program there. Camera Austria Graz is an institution that runs a magazine for photography and lens-based art, as well as an exhibition space and an editing house.
My name is Silvester Sabathiel, and my educational background lies in physics. I studied physics in Graz, and with special focus on theoretical physics and theories of gravity. So how the gravity of suns and planets influence other objects. And after that I changed the subject a bit and did my PhD in Norway and working on artificial intelligence and using those artificial intelligence also to learn something about how humans think with our natural brains, so to say. And now I'm working in a research institute that applies this knowledge about artificial intelligence to technology.
Okay. I will be easily recognizable by the fact I will be constantly coughing. Have to apologize for that. My name is Ekaterina Degot. I received a very classical education of an art historian, about which I will speak a little bit. And of course, art historian per se is not a job, not always. So my job is actually being a curator, like Anna. I'm currently director and chief curator of the festival Steirische Herbst in Graz, which presents every autumn interdisciplinary program of performances, theater, music, visual arts, and various discussions, as well as social projects. So I'm curating all of it. That's my 7th year when I live in Graz. Before that, I lived in Germany, but shorter. So Graz is the longest time I'm away from home, which used to be Moscow very, very long ago.
Yeah, hello. My name is Anselm Wagner. I'm also an art historian, and I'm professor for architecture theory at the Institute of Architecture Theory, Art History and Cultural Studies at Graz University of Technology. So my students are the future, hopefully the future architects. And my field of research and also teaching is not only theory of architecture, but also the history of architecture and also the visual arts of the 20th and 21st centuries.
Okay, maybe I start with the question why I was invited here. I think it might have been because I'm a photo curator, because photography is obviously a flat medium, especially in its current mode of contemplation, which is the screen, and which, I mean, the screen wasn't always that flat. It used to be quite big, but nowadays it's a really flat issue. The flatness of photographs results not only from the final form it takes, but also from its technical origin, which is the camera. And I'm currently preparing an exhibition with Alexandra Leikauf, who in her work is examining the way we look at images, how we see the world conveyed in images, and what perception of space is created by the single lens perspective of a camera. And I borrow the following thoughts from her. So beyond the obvious that a photograph has to be transferred to a surface and is therefore two-dimensional, we could say that the camera cannot deliver any three-dimensional images due to its single-eyed nature. Stereoscopes have already worked their way through this, and 360-degree cameras, and basically the whole virtual reality VR affair is an attempt to eliminate the shortcomings of two-dimensionality. So three-dimensionality is created in our heads and bodies. The idea of visualized three-dimensionality is absurd. So I look forward to discussing this issue with you. Particularly curious what you, Silvester, have to say about this matter as maybe an expert for this artificial intelligence and digital images.
Right. So I guess since I'm coming from two fields, kind of natural science, physics and AI as well, I was thinking, where does it fit the term of flatness or flat? It's a quite abstract term, and maybe later I can draw connections to the AI part. When I first thought about it, I was first thinking actually flatness plays a big role in natural science and how our understanding of nature evolved, and especially the aspect of that most of the time that humans thought that something is flat, it turned out as an illusion in the end. And there are kind of two ways how flatness or the illusion of flatness can be revealed. So for example, if we look sitting on a table, we can either, that is seemingly flat, we can either zoom very much inside and we'll start to see how unflat a wooden table, for example, is by recognizing its detailed structure, or when you have a microscope, having an even closer look at it, we'll see even more structure and how unflat the surface is. And the other way to realize that something is not flat is by zooming out. So maybe we can't see it when directly sitting in front of the table and looking at it, but maybe if we go further away, maybe we can see that the table is actually rounded or is not as flat from its global shape. Its global shape is not as flat. And with this analogy of the table, it actually happened many times in the history of natural science, starting when we take this analogy from the table, that flat things are not flat when you look closely. So they developed microscopes and other tools to look closer and closer, and we could see which rich world is actually hidden behind a seemingly flat surface. And also by going out and seeing the global shape of something, for example, the Earth was believed to be flat, but when zooming out, it became, for most of the people at least, obvious that Earth is a sphere, and this, and then actually, if we can go around the globe, or we all maybe know these maps when we're on the plane and see, we should go the shortest way to New York by plane, but it's so curved, even though it's the shortest path. And this thing kind of repeated in not only on Earth, but also looking at the whole structure of the space-time of the universe, where we first thought, okay, it's all linear, flat, our space-time in the beginning, but then the famous Einstein came and said, no, it's not all that flat. Actually, space-time can curve. And so we can observe that even light that should go straight is actually banded, as our plane is banded on the Earth. So is light banded when it goes around the sun, for example, and has been measured. And if we zoom even further out, then I'm done. Sorry for even the whole universe can be thought or might be bent as a whole. So there is this theory that similar to our Earth, we can go straight, and we will arrive at the same point. The same with our universe, but in 3 dimensions. If we continue to go straight, we will arrive at the same point. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting part when thinking about flatness in natural science, and especially that flatness most of the times turns out to be an illusion when looking close or far away. Maybe we'll find similar aspects also in your fields. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, all very interesting. So I actually want to say 2 things. One more general and second like as an art historian. In more general, I think the word flat belongs to the words we are using as metaphors, sometimes positively and sometimes negatively. And actually those meanings are also shifting, which is interesting. It tells us a lot about our society. Another notion of that kind is rich. We're usually using the word rich as something positive, like rich color, for instance. Who actually said that the rich is actually better than non-rich. And recently it actually has changed, because if you say now that the sauce or the soup is rich, some people would not eat it. So the rich is not 100% positive. And this is the same thing which happened to flat. So flat, we could often use as a negative characteristics, as like not complex enough or not spicy enough. But then recently, it's also being used as in the meaning of non-hierarchical. There was a famous book, although I forgot the name of the author, but it is famous. It's as famous, it became more famous than the author, which was published about 10 years ago, and it was called The World is Flat. And this is some sort of a neoliberal Bible that tells that the world is the same everywhere, the cafe where you're going, the coffee you are drinking, it's all the same. Of course, it's all the same if you live in Hong Kong or Seattle or Berlin, then yes. So actually, it's this book can be criticized very heavily, but its point was that it's actually the world became so non-hierarchical that is actually flat and that is actually good. But that was just the first point. And in general, as an art historian, when I heard the notion flat, of course, all my art history education came to me, because the classical art history education is all around the notion of flatness in modern art, modern painting in the first place. Because historically, the normative European painting, or we can say old masters painting, is understood as a challenge of rendering the volume. So that is actually what is understood as the professionalism of an artist, starting with this old Greek Zeno, who painted those grapes. So he fooled the birds who started to eat them. So he was such an incredible master, so he could render the volume in actually 2-dimensional situation. So it became a symbol of professionalism. This volume and flatness was something that was reserved for non-professional artists, bad artists, children, so-called primitives, including icons. So that was all that was considered flat, and this is why not professional enough in this academic tradition. Then comes modern painting, which of course changed this completely, first gradually and then fully assuming this flatness, like in Black Square of Malevich or in Mark Rothko paintings. And the main theorist of all of this thing was Clement Greenberg, who was an American, and of course some people here know it, and probably some people who were listening to us, but still I'm reminding that Clement Greenberg was an American art theorist who wrote a lot about this flatness, also in the 60s when this trend was already going away. But he was interpreting this flatness of painting as the truth of painting. So instead of lying that these are actually real grapes, the artist tells, so this is what it is. So the painting is flat. A painting is a rectangular form on a white background, as Malevich says. Nothing else. I will not give you anything else. You just have to accept this. And people were like deeply depressed seeing that, because by that moment they were actually hoping to get something else, a nice landscape, a nice, lady on a painting, and the artist tells them, no, I don't have this for you. So a painting is a painting, it's not a reality. Or actually in the same way of thinking much later, Magritte says that this is not a pipe. This is the image of a pipe. This is not the same, but this is not a real pipe on his famous painting. So, and Greenberg develops this theory of truth of painting that works on this meta level and on the medium specificity, and this is what he calls abstraction. So this is what is abstract about art, being abstracted to the level. So from that point of view, film, avant-garde or modernist film has to be about the fact that it is a film in the first place, like with Godard, or a literary work has to be about being a text in the first place. Now, to conclude, we can say that all of it is completely outdated because this heroism of flatness is completely gone. Because most of the things that surround us now are actually flat, including our credit cards, my moleskines, our phones, like most of the things are flat, except natural things. Also, the medium situation has changed completely, starting with photography, and then with all the so-called new media. They might be not new anymore, but they're not handmade. So there is, in photography, there is no challenge of rendering the object and transferring it. So that fact is happening actually mechanically. And of course, video, and I'm not even talking about artificial intelligence. So this part, but then there's also another part which made it completely outdated in the first at the first glance, that all the things that were rejected by this system are actually valorized now. We valorize tapestries, all sort of applied art, of course, non-European art that didn't start with the idea of rendering the volume in the first place. So many African artists are working in a completely different tradition, and of course icons and anything else. And so this flatness is actually valorized as a tradition on its own, and it's that one doesn't have to fight for it. But still, I actually think that there is something about this self-critical character of art, which Greenberg illustrates by this notion of flatness, which I find still actually valid. Because what does this flatness of painting tells us? What does the artist wants to say? That indeed, painting cannot do everything. So painting is a two-dimensional object, and art is not, art cannot do everything. Art has its limitations. So assuming this limitation means actually, being so open about flatness. And I think this is something that I miss in art currently, whereas sometimes I don't feel that artists would be actually open about them being not full of power into transforming the world. So I think that sort of like self-critical attitude might be still something positive, which we might still read in this purely formalist sometimes and not really, innovative flatness that meets the eye in the modernist painting.
Yeah, maybe I can continue here. And I would like to underline what you have said, that we have on the one hand the literal meaning of flatness, and on the other hand we have the metaphorical meaning. And of course these two are somehow interconnected, and the metaphorical meaning is has been used very often as a weapon, I would say. Now, for example, to go to my example of architecture, in modernist architecture, one of the most visible qualities of modernist architecture was that modernist buildings had a flat roof, and also the surface of the buildings, the walls, flat, without ornament, without any curvature and so on. So this was the most visible character of modernist, and is still today a very obvious quality of modernist architecture. When you go on the countryside and you see these white boxes and you say, this is a house made by an architect. This is typical modernist. On the other hand, when this came up in the 1920s and 30s, conservative and reactionary critics said that this building with flat roofs are not really something which fits to our German landscape. This is something Arabic or Semitic or Jewish, or which doesn't really belong to us, because we, as Germans, we have our houses with a pitched roof. And you could say, okay, this is just a form, pitched roof or flat roof. It's just a formalist discussion, but I think there's more behind. Not only the history of architecture, which of course tells us that in the Mediterranean area, houses had flat roofs, and in the Central Europe and Northern Europe's countries, buildings had pitched roofs. It also should describe a special character, meaning that the house with a pitched roof is German because it is an expression of the deep mind of German culture. It's not flat, meaning it's not just on the surface. It's nothing which is just superficial. And this is a very old discussion which dates back already to the 18th century, maybe earlier, that in the cultural wars between Germany and France, for example, Germans regarded themselves always as the more sincere, the more serious, the more deep characters with deep thoughts, the country of the thinkers and the poets. We Land der Dichter und Denker. Excuse me. Whereas the French are more superficial. They are just surfing on the surface. They are flat in the metaphorical way. So they're more interested in fashion, for example, or this is, or also the French language was regarded to represent this more of a flat character. And in the 19th and 20th century, we find this same constellation again in the relationship between Europe and the United States. So America still today is regarded by many Europeans as a culture which is just interested in the surface. The people are very friendly, but this friendliness is nothing which is real. It's just a play. It's just on the surface. It's nothing serious which can be taken as something as it is. And maybe you have seen the infamous movie Barbie movie by Greta Gerwig, which is in somehow a kind of exaggeration of this superficiality of American culture. So here in this discussion, flat is always something regarded to be negative and to be something which has a lot of deficits, which is something which is without any value, without any quality, you could say. And at the same time, and this is a phenomenon I don't really can explain at the moment, at the same time we have this ideal of flatness. As you described the table before, we are sitting here around the table, which is very, very flat. It's made of more or less plastic, so it's really, for us, for our senses, it is absolutely flat. And our smartphones are flat, and our computers are flat too. Everything we use is flat, not just because it's practical and useful, also because it's somehow aesthetical. It is an expression of contemporary aesthetics, being things we like or we love, or which are fetishized, like our smartphone has to be very smooth and very flat. So we like this flatness, and at the same time we hate it. Or maybe the subjects of this saying are not the same.
What you're saying is very interesting. May I ask, was it explicitly described the flat roofs as Jewish?
Yes. There was a postcard published in, I guess, in the early 1930s. But I think it was before 1933, before Hitler came in power in Germany. And this postcard showed the famous Weissenhof-Siedlung in Stuttgart, which is one of the most important examples of modernist architecture from Germany, with this more or less white houses, and each of these houses has a flat roof. And in this photograph, there was made a montage with Arabs sitting on dromedaries and so on, and the caption of this postcard was, "This is the suburbs of Jerusalem." So the subtext was, this is not just Arabic or Mediterranean or not German, it is Jewish.
Oh, yeah, very interesting.
For this is just one of many examples.
Yeah. Do you think it's Jewish? But because Jerusalem then was a multi-ethnic.
Of course, this was nonsense.
The Arab.
The critique as such was nonsense, but it is interesting that the flat roof was regarded to be Jewish, which of course is not true or is ridiculous. Yeah? But it's from the National Socialist point of view, this was an argument.
Yeah, I just meant that it wasn't distinguishing Jewish, but Jerusalem wasn't Jewish then, like mainly Jewish, but
of course. Yeah.
Well, they were Oriental.
It was just a symbol for
Orientalist.
Yeah, Morocco houses are also, they have flat, as you said, like the south of Europe. It's indeed, it's very interesting how Germany and Austria have this Nordic ideal of those roofs. Yeah, indeed. True. Till now, actually. So, guilty pleasure, I'm playing this game, GeoGuessr, where you have to guess what it is short. And I like to guess by architecture. And actually, you can tell. So you can tell what looks Spanish, what looks Italian, what looks international modernism, which is usually in Germany or Netherlands, and what looks this Scandinavian northern German style. So it's actually very distinctive. It's true, and the flatness of the roof, it's an important aesthetical but also ideological point which is made.
And it was rather funny that it was invented, you could say, in the history of modernist architecture. It was invented in Germany, Netherlands, and so in countries where a flat roof is not really a good idea, I would say. And because in the Mediterranean world it was used for centuries before. But here it was invented against practical reasons.
Yeah.
But at the same time, modernists said that the modernist architecture is something being functionalist. So every form is not just formalistic, just for itself, for fun, for aesthetics. It has a real function. The function was having a roof garden.
And solarium, because at that time it was considered very healthy.
Yeah, a natural solarium that you can take sun baths on the rooftop. But it was very, very difficult to get rid of wet spots on the ceilings.
No, of course
it was very, very difficult. It took decades to get this problem fixed. So of course it was a more ideological and aesthetical invention or decision and not a very practical one.
Yeah, and of course there was all this movement of organic architecture was actually against it with Niemeyer and others, because indeed, as we all know, all this modernist architecture and furniture is maybe not the most friendly, right? I could not say it's a very friendly table, because it's smooth, yes, but it has this, angles that might be quite unfriendly sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I think it's aesthetic. It's an aesthetic idea, and it's also, I think, has something to do with hygiene. So with the idea that the absolutely smooth, flat surface can easily be cleaned, like this table here, and we have the illusion that when it can easily be cleaned, that it is without any viruses and bacteria and so, which is nonsense, of course. But we still have this idea also in medicine, for example. It is still impossible to have wooden furniture in hospitals because the hygienic rules says no, the furniture has to be absolutely sealed, sealed for surfaces which can be easily cleaned. And when you have wooden surfaces, maybe the material can never be so smooth and never be so sealed, and bacteria and so on can settle there, which is nonsense, because there are a lot of experiments done that natural surfaces like wood are much more antibacterial than, for example, a plastic surface, something else. Yeah. But we're still this idea, right, is that a flat smooth surface is also healthy, and I think this was a big argument also for the modernists. It looks nice. It is an ideal. Now we heard that flatness doesn't really exist in nature or in the universe, but it is and things, I guess, which don't really exist have a very good starting point to become ideals. We love it somehow because it is something we do not really find anywhere.
I had one thought which I wanted to share as a question. I don't know what you think about it. I understood it's a very simple thought, but it didn't occur to me before that actually the whole reproduction technique since centuries was actually aimed at flat things. So all that, like printing, books, then all the zero copies and whatever, and photography, of course. So this is something which is easily reproducible. But now in the development, which is I still have to process it, we have these 3D printers which make it possible to easily reproduce three-dimensional things, if I understand right. To me, it's still, I'm really not guessing how that can be. So, but you must tell us if this is like really the case, and what does it change in our idea of flatness?
Well, actually, I would like to forward that question to you, Anna, because you mentioned in your introduction, or maybe I misunderstood, please correct me if so, but that's something I took for, that photography is kind of meant to be on a flat surface, and would be a photograph in 3 dimensions. My question is, do you think it will stay like that? Will photography stay in 2D? And if so, if it will expand to 3 dimensions maybe and will be not flat anymore, I'm wondering what it does to our perception. I could still think, even though the 3-dimensional photo will include maybe more realism, more information, but still the reduction to the flat surface actually gives us something. Or what do you think?
Well, what Alexandra is arguing for is that an image that was captured by a camera, which is a one-eyed machine, has to be transferred on any kind of surface. And this means, I mean, the surface can be curved also, but still it doesn't mean that this image has a body, and that it is transferring the bodily experience to the image. And we we are desperately seeking this. And I think it's an interesting point what Ekaterina mentioned, this three-dimensional, this 3D print, because it's relying also on cameras. I mean, it's a scan movement around a body, an object or a body. And then the reproduction is made in the form of material. It's a three-dimensional transfer of these camera or scanner images. So it's a good question. I mean, it's obviously then a three-dimensional object, and we have this already in the forms of models of spaces, for example. I mean, architects work with models, and it's a, for example, to compare a rendering, architectural rendering, a two-dimensional image with a model of a space is interesting, because now I think architects use renderings much more than these handmade space models, architectural models, but still the spatial experience is richer in these models than in any rendering, I would argue. I don't know what you think.
Yes, this is absolutely true. Renderings are just used for selling. This is for demonstrating the people who may buy your house or rent your house or your apartment, which you're designing, that they can get an impression, because normally people cannot read a plan, or can also not so easily read a model. And an image, and three-dimensional image, and an illusionistic image is always something we can easily grasp, and which is very familiar. We know it, have been knowing it since centuries, since the invention of linear perspective. I would like to go back to the 3D printer, which is interesting, because when you observe the 3D printer, when it makes the print, it is a rather linear process. It's just lines. It's just, I would say, one dimension. It's not three, not two. It's just one dimension. And at the end, we have this very sometimes rather ugly product, which just is a kind of drawing in space, which is using kind of clay or something else. But I think the idea that photographs someday would not be flat anymore would mean that photographs would be like sculptures, so three-dimensional, and or sometimes it wouldn't be discernible from reality. So you could make this 3D photograph from the world, and maybe we take this world and leave our with all the CO2 problems.
Would not it be then like a stereo film?
I mean, they are holograms.
Maybe comparable to holograms.
Photography, because if you say a 3D sculpture is a sculpture, it has a background in photography, but
and then sculptures exist since a very long time, but still the two-dimensional versions of that kept going on to exist. So I don't know, the reduction to a flat surface seems to give our human brain some kind of, it's an extra actually, more than reduction, because it adds the perspective of something. So I'm wondering if that tells us, okay, no, maybe not everything will go to 3D in our world at some point, but we want to, as humans, want to have some perspective, or the perspective of the photographer, or the special lighting, especially from this direction. So the reduction can be an extra.
But the attractiveness of the photograph is not its flatness. It is the opposite. It is the illusion that I see, for my impression, a real space with real people and real landscape. So this reality effect is what normally affects me or many, many people. So that I can say, okay, this has really happened. When I take a photograph now from this room, then I can say, okay, this is not a flat surface. This is you and you and you sitting on this day in the evening in this room. So we don't see the flatness. A photograph where the flatness is visible is absolutely not interesting for most of the people. So this is experimental photography or something which is modernist in the way as Clement Greenberg has described. A photograph which demonstrates its flatness. But this is just...
Still, I would say that on the practical level, each of us owns much more flat objects than non-flat objects.
Yes.
We all have lots of photos, even, and of course, we see the space and people, but we touch it and we kind of can have them in quite a small place. And I think it's relatively recent developments. Well, recent if we speak of starting with, 19th century, when the photos and books and images became so common. Because when we go again back in history, then probably there were much less flat objects. If we look at these first portraits, like these Fayum portraits that were put in the coffin with dead people, I think for the people of that time, it looked amazing. So like just a piece of wood, and then it represents a person in a very naturalistic way, something which for us is quite normal. So for me, it's rather the 3D printer is something strange, which I don't know how it works actually. But for them, it was a miracle. But right now, I think we are all, the idea of flat image is the most common thing which surrounds us absolutely everywhere. So it's actually very difficult to speak about flatness because it's so normal.
So it's like fish talking about water, yeah.
I think like in the old cave paintings, has always been these two objects, like the object made of wood, anything, and the hand pushed on the wall with color. So this is maybe like the first flat image.
Yes, but the cave is never really flat. It is curvy, and the cave painters also were very clever, including the irregularities of the surface of the stone into their images.
Yeah.
So it was 2 and 3 dimensional at the same time.
Yeah, when we speak about flat, I think we also speak about two different things: smooth, but also thin. So there can be smooth things that are not thin, like this table is not really thin. And then there can be thin things that are not completely smooth, that they have more like a natural surface, and that's probably in nature, like a leaf of a tree. It's thin, but it's not smooth, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what I would say.
Yeah, but this is an interesting idea. But I think that in our cultural production, flat things always tend to get very smooth and also very and very thin. So the ideal to be thin. Yeah.
Because it's
again the example of the smartphone. It's cheaper. It's not so heavy. But when you imagine how cell phones looked like in the 1990s, it's very like bricks. You could.
This is also fashionable. Yeah, indeed. So the thinner the thing are, so they're like more sophisticated. Interestingly, so will it go? We see now actually the reversal of many cultural trends and social trends with the rethinking of climate change and so many things are being kind of rethought, and so this fashion of flatness. So will it stop? I don't know.
Yeah, we have it at the same time. So we have, as you have told, this ideal of flatness and of the thin structure element. So it is, for example, when I talk to architects, then they tell me how to construct a flat roof, that it looks like to be very, very thin, which is not really possible because you have to do all the insulation stuff, and then they have all the machines on the roof normally for climate and so on. So it is very, very difficult to really construct a flat roof which looks like to be thin, and they have a lot of tricks that it looks like to be thin, but actually it isn't. Yeah. And so this is an ideal which is still very, very prominent. At the same time, we have this comeback of natural things. So you have just a wooden beam, very fat, very rustical, used as a table in fancy restaurants.
Yeah.
There is nothing flat and there's nothing thin. It's just wood. So you experience the material as such.
Yeah, because that's about authenticity. It signals something else. Yeah.
To be authentic and not artificial.
So, that's the two parameters, so to say. Like there is the extent of flatness is culturally dependent, as you have mentioned, but also there is some temporal evolvement. Apparently, right now, in some parts, we are evolving towards more flat, like in many designs. Do you think that's something? How it will continue? It will be an oscillation between more and less flat design, and that distributed over different cultures, and how will the future look like?
That's a good question.
Or will some things just become flatter and flatter until...
I think it might disappear. So indeed, you cannot probably make a credit card even flatter than it is. But what you can, and then get rid of credit card at all and just have your finger or your eye, so your body. So then this flatness just goes, but that your body becomes involved, which is a bit scary. But
so the flat things are just one step towards
maybe
disappearing, where everything disappears and just
instead of film or photos, just a 3D reality, which surrounds you. Instead of money, just transfer with your thoughts, and I don't know. And paper does not exist anymore. Anyway.
This is old-fashioned to have paper.
Yeah, it's very old-fashioned, which I like very much.
It still is very flat.
I like it very much. Yeah, these all perspectives are scary, so that there must be some sort of resistance to it, where people would value things that are not flat. Like indeed, like you say, like in a restaurant, really heavy wooden tables or things like that. Yeah.
I also like and found interesting the idea of conservative reactionary movements. It's funny that you mentioned this postcard. I've seen it once because it's a degrading modernism. And then in Silvester's introduction, there was also the flat Earth theory. So on the one hand, these is kind of two movements against modernity, against enlightenment, like the flat Earth theory. That's doubting that the Earth has volume and is curved, and the other that the flat roof is the end of our society or whatever of German culture. And yeah, I just found this remarkable that there are two movements. The one is like in favor of flatness, and the other is against flatness, and both are against Enlightenment and modernism. And so,
yes, I think in culture, all science, nearly all science, can be used for everything. So the semantics of a sign can change. Then one time it's this, and the other time it's that. So I doubt that cultural products or artworks always has to have the same meaning. So the meanings are changing, and also in this very political and polemical and not very grounded or scientific discourse, people just take what they find to use it as a weapon in the cultural or in the political discussion.
When you mentioned the Germans before and how they mentioned that the flat architecture is not deep enough, maybe for I could have expected, or I expected something the opposite way. They maybe Germans identify themselves as a straightforward, functional society, and therefore they like the flat architecture. So in that sense, arbitrary. They can pick whatever their culture fits.
Will find also this argument on the other side, of course. Yeah.
But this is just a different. This is a post-war, newly invented identity of Germany. There's a modern country starting with the 50s, where indeed the most typical architecture of Germany would be now modernist. And if you see something in this chalet style, then it's rather Carinthian.
Yeah, and I mean, this postcard, the style this postcard has, it reminds me, of course, also to current right-wing tendencies in Germany, where people meet, like right-wing politicians, and discuss the questions of how to expel or get rid of non-German cultures. And this would be that's also the mindset of this postcard, because so it's still in some people's minds.
Yeah, I think this is still, or it comes back, I would say, because it's funny.
I think it was always there.
It was always there, and now it's getting more visible, or it has more voters.
It's on the surface.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that on the countryside in Austria, I don't know how it was in Germany, maybe it was similar. In the countryside in Austria, buildings with flat roofs have been forbidden for a very long time.
Forbidden?
Forbidden, yes.
For which reason?
Because this does not fit into the...
This aesthetically doesn't...
Yeah, it doesn't fit in the landscape. Yeah, the traditional landscape has this big roof. It was forbidden, and all the architects fought for being allowed to build buildings on the countryside with flat roofs. This was a long cultural war, you could say. So, and now, since I guess 20 years, about 20 or 30 years, in most areas of Austria, you're allowed to build buildings with flat roofs. And then the architects, again, were mooning, oh no, what have we done? Look at these ugly boxes in the countryside. So, and the more progressive architects now, again, build buildings with detached roofs, with pitched roofs.
Is it more organic?
Yeah, because it really fits much better into the landscape when you have these white boxes on the countryside. This is something which is not really fitting in this.
Yeah, but the whole point was not to fit. So because that modernist building is a state.
Yes. Yes.
where you're saying, I do not fit. I'm not a tree. I'm not a lake. I'm a white, strange object. This is the whole point. Yeah, they are very uncomfortable, those places. I've been there, but the ideological point is very strong.
And the people, the people who move out from the cities to the suburbs or to the countryside to build their own detached house with the garden and so on. In most times, or not most, in many times, they want to have this modernist box with the flat roof. And now the architects know that doesn't fit to landscapes. So we have the kind of total conversion of the whole discussion. These things are always changing and evolving.
But it still remains strong statements that people can agree with it and not agree with it, but it's still this flatness remains a strong statement, aesthetical and even political.
Yes, and it's saying, I am modern, I'm new.
Yeah.
So when say I would like to have a modern house, that means it has to have, or most times it has to have a flat roof. This is what they want. They don't want to be outdated or backwards or something.
Yeah, I strongly disagreed with the flat architecture when I was in Norway, because there they have this little, not always little, but the wooden red houses, as you might know, similar to Sweden, and with the nice roofs on them, and sometimes the non-flat roofs have still grass on it, and they put their sheep on the roofs to eat the grass. So from time to time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That I've never seen.
And then you see, like you described, a white box somewhere in between. It's like doesn't feel right in this nice fairy tale landscape. Something flat and functional like this, or seemingly functional, but.
I would like to go back to the notion you have made at the beginning of our talk when you said that flatness or also straightness, is this right? Straightness is always an illusion. It does not really exist in our universe. I didn't realize this before, because it's a new idea, and I think this is very interesting that we adore somehow this idea, or we have this ideal of something which does not really exist, or many things seem to be like that, like flat, but as something we can really find in nature. It is an construction. It is an idea. It is fantasy. It's not something. For example, when we go on the countryside, or also in the Midwest of the United States, where the prairie is absolutely flat, you have just the sky over you and the flat prairie. Also, the flat prairie is not really flat. It is an abstraction when we talk about flatness.
I guess partly the reason is that humans come up with the simplest solution they can find, partly. So when all we see is mostly from our human perspective, down-to-earth perspective, is that the earth is flat. Why should we come up with a more complex solution than the rest will be flat all over? It would be add some complexity without any reason to assume it will be curved, and to some degree flat surfaces or straight lines are one of the simplest things that we can assume, kind of. So
yes, but it's easier to make a somehow curvy line than to make a really straight line.
Yes.
to produce a really straight line without any techniques you take helping you is really difficult. So maybe this is the fascination of these things, that it is hard to produce.
Right.
It is simple on one hand, but to make it is nearly impossible, very, very difficult.
Yeah, it is an abstraction, and it also requires some technology,
Yes.
or at least some sort of technology.
Mm.
Things flat.
So I don't know. I see also in nature the beauty of sometimes simple things, but then the interplay between simplicity that makes something beautiful, but then also something that gives complexity, can make things richer and more beautiful, gives more possibilities of how our universe works. For example, when Einstein came up, that our space-time is not flat, but can be curved. Completely new world opened up. What can happen in our universe?
Yeah, that's actually from we're now mostly talking about some aesthetical things, but from the scientific point of view, there is no such thing as flatness, right? Or no, how would you describe it?
I would say most of the times, at least, that we assumed flatness, it turned out to be not flat. I mean, most of the things are not idealized anyway in nature as we pictured them. So an idealized flat surface, I guess, is does not exist in nature as we abstract it away.
Like a pure room without any dust is nearly impossible to produce. You can have to, I think, 99.99% without dust, but not 100%. It's impossible. So this is also the difficulty of having purity. And I think flatness has also something to do with our idea of purity. Absolute purity or cleanliness, purity, different things, yeah, doesn't really exist either. And this is the reason why we, I repeat myself, why we like it so much, because it is something we can't really reach. It is something like a Fata Morgana. We want to have it, but it always disappears.
It's also the fact with projection of the Earth. I mean, that's the Earth is somehow crucial in this discussion, because if we look at maps are flat renderings of non-flat Earth, and there's always problems with that because the rendering is never exact. You cannot render a ball. And then there's political questions all around it, and that's interesting. I think the idea of forced flatness leads to problems.
Yeah, I think this is a good keyword with the maps, because flatness has also a lot to do with power. When you have a map, then somehow you own this piece of Earth. You can grasp it, you can understand it, you know where everything is. So it becomes an object for you. And when we go back to the history of map producing, so always this had a lot to do with commerce on one hand, and on the other hand with military and of wars. And I need a map of the country I'm going in with my army, of course.
Yeah.
And
colonialism.
Yeah, colonialism, for example.
Yes.
And here, flatness is a tool for having power over this special piece of the earth, of this land. And who owns the map also owns the land somehow.
Let's
And
people.
you can go also into our galaxy. So mapping the whole galaxy means also what can I do with it? How can I use it?
It lets people dream, maybe like how they could use the power. First doing it on the flat map lets people dream how to project it in reality. Imagine it first, and then sometimes, unfortunately, realize that
Actually, you made a very strong point with those maps, because indeed translating our spherical planet into a flat map actually changes proportions. So I've seen recently that the size of Africa is actually much bigger in relation to other continents, but we don't see it because it is being rendered from one particular physical point of view. Because I guess to translate something spherical into something flat, it can be done differently according to from which point of view you are doing it. So we are looking at a map which is done from our probably European perspective. Actually, a map in Australia, is it still same thing, or is it upside down?
Yeah.
Is that one? I don't know. I have no idea. So they also kind of accept that it is like the upper part is here and this is the lower part, although it's actually not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
I would like to go to another meaning of flat. Flat is also, as a noun, a word for an apartment.
Yes.
And I was doing some research. Why is this coincidence? Is it just coincidence, or does this mean something? And flat means that I live on one level. So I don't have a house with more,
as opposed to a house.
An apartment, not normally. The usual apartment has just one level. And the interesting thing is, I would say that the idea of the apartment or the flat is connected with the idea of housing, sometimes also social housing. So I need a certain amount of square meters for a certain amount of people. So it is a very flat ratio, having the amount of people and the amount of apartments or the amount of square meters. So this is a discussion of space, of 3 dimensions. But in our society, in our economy, we just count the really 2-dimensional surface. Of course, you cannot live in a flat which has just a height of 1 meter. You need 2 meter and 40 or 50 or something else, minimum. And what makes the quality of the space is absolutely out of sight, because a flat with 2 meter 20 height or 4 meters is something absolutely different. But what counts is just the square meters. So the notion of a flat, there's no direct correlation between, but it's interesting that we talk about flats where just the 2-dimension really count, and Henri Lefebvre has observed that in his history of imaginations of space, that in the capitalist society we have this view from above, this view on the map, where also the building lots and the whole world, you could say, is looked from above as flat pieces which can be purchased or sold or something else. It's no longer the view, the perspective view which was created in the Renaissance, that you walk through a city and have this perspective view. You just look from above and have this more
No, that's
flats.
Yeah, I never thought about it.
Interesting to know. And I was also wondering before our conversation started, like, are we actually talking about apartment flats or about the more abstract flat? But it's interesting to see the connection here. Yeah.
I always had to think. I remember that you talked about this impossibility of flatness, and that each material has a depth, and if you go into it, or if you zoom out, you see that the Earth is curved; it's not flat. And now that you mentioned the view from above, I had to think of Powers of 10, the movie. Was it by Ray and Charles Eames? I'm not.
Which film?
The Powers of 10. Powers of 10. It's the early film that emulates the summer Google Street View. Google Earth. I'm sorry, Google Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a simulated view from the sky to Earth, zooming into a scene where people have picnic, and then zooming into their people's skin, zooming into the body. So it starts with this objectifying view from above, and then it renders the flat view and gives it materiality somehow, renders in and out. So but it doesn't make sense maybe if you haven't seen it to discuss it. But
it is a kind of macro and microcosm. You have the I think the whole Earth is only in the beginning.
The whole Earth.
The whole Earth.
So you know the film, right?
I've seen it 1 year ago. And then it zooms in and to the atoms and the tiniest elements of material and of structure.
Yeah, I had to think of that when your introduction.
Yes.
Know what to watch then to yes.
Yeah.
So it always brings us to the fact that flatness also in an apartment situation is it has some element of abstraction and reduction of indeed human space, which has to be a space. It's reduced to the surface, like in the same way it is reduced to the capitalist indeed mapping of territories to be sold. So it's so then it's this flatness becomes this capitalist element, and something to think about.
Yeah, it's as you have told us before that we have produced so many flat things and paper and all this stuff is always flat. It is a very easy. It's also an easy commodity. It's, or making things that they can work as commodities, I guess.
We haven't talked about flat jokes because it's an exhibition about humor.
That's true.
Do you have one?
I'm not a good
I
joke
have
teller.
the allowance by my wife when we got married that I can make one flat joke a day, but just one.
So you can make one.
I feel I have already made my joke in the mornings. Yes, flat jokes.
So flat joke is a joke which is not deep. What does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this term exists in English, actually. In German, it's called Flachwitze. In flacher Witz.
It's a bad
complex.
It's a bad joke. Well, it is
it's a very simple joke.
Very simple.
Well,
simple. Not really bad. It's simple.
That illustrates your point that German culture wants to be deep.
Yes.
Even in jokes.
Yes, even in jokes. Even jokes have to be a serious meaning.
Yeah.
The second serious meaning, yeah. Yeah, this is a good point.
Yeah, so flat indeed, it works as a negative characteristic, which was actually assumed and adopted by culture because it's easier to produce, it's easier to reproduce, it's easier to calculate, to sell, and indeed it's easier to measure, indeed. So this is all very much into this capitalist logic of growth and calculation.
Yes.
Indeed.
So you mean the negative notion derives from this?
Well, I think initially it was probably seen as something negative, but against us feeling this as negative and even using it as a negative term, the culture and the everyday culture actually produce more and more of that. And so this was the question we discussed, to what extent can it go? So how flat can our world become, like all IKEA furniture? Or so then it will just dissipate. So when it's becoming flatter and flatter, or there will be a resistance to it, as you say in architecture. So there is a resistance to flat roofs.
Yeah, when I talk to my students when they write a master thesis or a PhD, then I observe myself that I rather frequently tell them, don't just remain on the surface. You have to just take a small piece of land, of the scientific land, but you have to go deep. You have to drill into the very hard ground to find out something really new and which is interesting. Just surfing on the surface is not science. This is Wikipedia or something.
Yeah, I'm saying that too, but not even as a metaphor, but on a very practical level. So like young curators, when they build an exhibition, so they think of putting, I don't know, one work here, one work there, but they don't think about the space. And I always have to stress that any exhibition is the space. You have to think in the first place how you go through it. I'm always asking, okay, what do I see? I'm entering this room. What do I see first? Where I'm supposed to move? Where you want me to move in this space? So it's always a spatial situation to me, but it's being easily forgotten. That's true, because it's also still easier to see it. It's just a wall with some flat elements on a flat wall. So for me, it requires an effort with, of course, with contemporary students when I used to teach in a photography school, to remind them that there is such a thing as reality is already difficult, because everything is happening indeed on screen, on a very flat surface, and it requires effort to go out of it. So we live in a flat world already, and it's we need an effort to go out of it.
This is interesting. In my former life, I've been a curator, but it's long ago. So do now curators, a question to both of you, do curators now when they plan an exhibition use maps of the exhibition space, or do they make a model, a 3D model? What's normal, or what is state of?
Well, it depends. Of course, you have a space now which you know very well because you work with it. I have each time a new space. I don't do three-dimensional models, but I do draw, and I'm trying to imagine a space, and we use a lot with this. I don't physically build a model, but with production we do build a three-dimensional rendering of it. Yeah, where we have to see what fits there, but indeed, as I said, what do we see first? How do we move into space, especially when it's a complex space? It is useful, and there are special programs for that. Yes, true.
Actually, I have a model. I work with a model because it's, as you mentioned, it's the same space. So I had a model built in 1:30, and I can use it, as a model, like a puppet house, we call it, violet puppet house, and And I can also use computer programs, but that are flat, like in design, and then print it in 1:30 and put it in the space model. And what I also do, so there's a movement between 2 and 3 dimensional, and I also like to film when I put these works in the space model, and then I film with my phone through it. And this gives an impression of space, although it's 2-dimensional images. It's funny how this...
That's a great method, because yes, and I find it important, and sometimes like unexperienced curators, indeed, they think as a page of a book, so they put some works on a page. But I said, no, this is not. It's not only that. It's so we have to feel it, and we always, as I say, we always also see with our back. So we see something, but we also see something we just saw 2 seconds ago, and it's still in our head. So it's actually it's a volume situation, but it requires an effort to keep this all somehow.
When I go to exhibitions, it's rather often an impression for me that these exhibitions have been made somehow 2-dimensional by the curators. So it's more paper in a metaphorical way, paper on the walls.
Yeah, one has to fight it somehow.
It's difficult, of course. And in your field, what do you are maps or 2-dimensional illustrations used, or is this something old-fashioned and no longer of any value?
No, definitely it's still used, because in the end, that's the only way to communicate, even for the computers, to us, is with 2-dimensional maps or graphs or whatever, which is actually a challenge, because if we want to map either artificial neural networks and what they do inside, they are very high-dimensional, we say. We have to map them somehow useful to 2 dimensions, which is not always an easy task. But for us, it's necessary, because it's the only way for us to visualize, understand something in 2D or maximum 3D. And beyond that, our brain is not made for more dimensions. And since you mentioned the movie before, there's also a nice book called Flatland. Not sure if you've heard of it, but it's about a story about little abstract creatures, geometric creatures. So, and I think, if I remember correctly, the book starts with little points that talk about the higher dimension of lines, if they ever heard of them, but the society was not ready for that, and said no, believed to be crazy. And then the book goes on to the 2-dimensional creatures that talk about the 3 dimensions, and then at the end there are this and there's this 2-dimensional creatures with made out of squares or little triangles, all made within a funny story, because each has its own character, and they're talking about the 3 dimensions. So that they can't imagine something like this. How would something like another dimension, how would it look like? And make the aim of the book, I imagine, is to extrapolate that for us, that we are kind of stuck in our imaginations in 3 dimensions, whereas in theory there could be 4 dimensions or 5 dimensions or more. Indeed, in physics, actually, we have 4, or they talk about 4 dimensions, because we have space and time, which interact within each other. But then again, the space-time is hard for us, or maybe impossible to imagine. So we again have to go back to write this structure down on paper, a 2-dimensional structure. So in the end, wherever we work, kind of have to put it down to 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions in order for us to grasp it intuitively.
Yeah, that sounds nice. Yeah, it means that to visualize something means that it has to be flattened and it has to be reduced to 2 dimensions in nearly all fields of
And
showing research.
can time be flat or not? Can this notion be applied to time?
It's a good question. Because usually we apply
To space.
to space. Not only that, but we apply it to something that has at least 2 variables. We say so. This table is flat because we can assign it to it because we can go left or right or up and left. It's hard to communicate that through the microphone now, but I hope you get the idea. And whereas for time, basically only has 1 parameter.
Linear time.
Yeah. So it's a good question whether you can build or
But is
apply
time
it.
I don't know anything about it. But is time always linear, or is it simply because of our human life? This is how we perceive it.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, linear is another term, and no, it's not always linear. So as also Einstein found out that time can be relative, so it depends on first where we are in our space-time zone, and then clocks run differently here on Earth than we would on a mountain because the gravity is weaker there, and also if we move fast, very fast, I have to say, in order to get noticeable, then the time will run slower or faster. So
the time is actually more complex than we assume in our everyday life. So that probably means that in our everyday life we experience time as flat, although it's actually much more complex.
Exactly.
That's that. Yeah.
I once learned that there's this term chrononormativity, which means that we perceive time only as linear.
Right.
So normativity would be flatness in that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a good analogy for that.
Is this really true? From the personal human perspective, time is not linear.
How we narrate it is, I would say, that we always...
No, sorry, it's linear, but time is not always, has not always the same speed, I would say.
No,
for
I think
us.
chrononormativity is about linear.
Linear, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, but the speed is different.
Subjectively and physically.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, I think our perception of time as a linear thing from the past toward the future, it's really very, very much affected by human mortality. So this is a historical perspective of time, a very human perspective of time, and I guess nature might have a very different one. I don't know, anyone with a different experience. So, well, I assume that
nature, how
more
perceives time,
or other creatures that they don't have that sort of feelings. So I guess there is a space for time to be considered either flat or non-flat. But this is a fascinating perspective, and I thought about it.
Like space and abstraction.
Space-time, the combination.
No. Isn't time like space and abstraction made sometimes by some humans?
Yes, definitely. Every model that we have,
don't know.
Yeah, I think so. So every model that we have and that we assign words to, like space and time, in the end is an abstraction in this sense. But for us, apparently, it worked out very well in order to predict many things that happen in the world, to organize it in that way and to take the abstraction of space and time. Initially it was separated, but then turned out, okay, if we combine them and explain it in a similar way, space-time, as we did before with just space or time separately, then we can predict even more with this. So yeah, it's an abstraction, but maybe a useful one.
Yes, very useful, of course. Yeah.
But
Now we have moved to the last questions of the universe.
from flat jokes to
I think we already went to such philosophical depths, not flatness. So I need time to intellectually digest all of it. Just I don't have any immediate more thoughts about the flatness.
And it was also fascinating that every one of us was talking about the specificities of her on his own field, no? And it was interesting how this could overlap somehow sometimes.
I actually went way beyond my field of competence. So I said lots of bullshit about something I absolutely don't know about, but I was very glad.
that's why we're here, right? We have all the freedom and the
Opinions.
Yeah, it's clandestine. Clandestine.
yeah, I enjoyed it very much as well. Saw the connections, the differences between how it's used, and, especially the connections, kind of the metaphors which kind of connect the flatness in different ways.
So-
And
Then we probably might also thank each other and the artist who gave us an opportunity to think about a notion actually that would probably never came to mind.
Yeah, and to sit here in this nice basement room.
It's a secret room, so we are not supposed to say where it is.
Okay. It's
Secret room, but we also have to thank the institution.
somewhere in the world.
Yeah, the curators of the project and the institution who is hosting.
Yeah. It's very clandestine. Yes, thank you very much. It was very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thanks the technicians.
Yes,
To the technician.
danke sehr.